legislation, but sellers say there's little evidence that putting the cigarettes out of sight helps.
Ireland have had a display ban now for 18 months and they've actually seen youth smoking increase, and the retailers are losing 20% of their sales overnight when it was introduced.
But the tide is certainly turning against the European smoker. For one reason or another, they could be a dying breed. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera, London.
A group of Filipinos who suffered human rights abuses during former President Ferdinand Marcos's rule have finally received compensation. But they also call on the government to issue a formal public apology. Margot Ortigas reports.
The long wait is finally over for these victims of human rights violations. Hundreds queued in Manila to receive a check of $1,000 as compensation for abuses suffered under the Marcos dictatorship. The money recovered from assets in the United States. Bernadette Aquino was a student activist against the regime in the 70s. She spent 2 years in a military prison and was repeatedly tortured.
For me, this is victory, a proof of the truth of what we have always said, that there were human rights violations during those times. But just because we received some sort of compensation now doesn't mean we will stop here. We will continue to demand a public apology for the atrocities they committed against the Filipino people.
But they may have to wait even longer for that.
Person connected with the rebellion.
In 25 years, the Philippine government hasn't managed to successfully try the Marcoses on home ground, much less provide official acknowledgement of any violations committed under the dictator's rule. With the help of U.S. lawyers, the victims filed a class action suit in the United States, where many Marcos assets were held and the deposed ruler himself had gone into exile.
There have been bills in the Philippine Congress since 1992 to compensate the victims, but there's no money to compensate them. So I don't see how it's going to happen. But for the private litigation, these victims would have nothing.
But these people say they are only the tip of the iceberg. There are thousands more like them, unacknowledged and not on the recipient list. And the wheels of justice in their own country have only proven too slow and unreliable once again. Margot Ortigas, Al Jazeera, Manila.
To Mexico now, where the army has killed at least 6 suspected drug gangsters in a shootout. Authorities say soldiers returned fire after being shot at from a cave in Buenavista de Cuellar, a small town in the southern state of Guerrero. Authorities later found 9 rifles in the hideout, along with blankets and cooking equipment. Space Shuttle Discovery has landed in Florida, ending its 39th and final mission as the world's most travelled spacecraft. It's the first of NASA's 3 spaceships to be retired, and it'll go on display in a museum. Imran Khan has more.
Discovery's gear is down and locked.
It'll be the last time we'll see Discovery shadow over Earth. 27 years and the grand old dame of space glides gently into retirement.
We have main engine start. 2.
And what a career she's had.
Booster ignition and the final liftoff of Discovery.
Traveling through space for nearly 241 million kilometers and spending 1 full year sailing against the backdrop of planet Earth.
Station in Houston, Discovery has capture confirmed.
Her return home started at the International Space Station, orbiting high above the globe. She had delivered parts for the first humanoid robot in space. But all things come to an end.
Space Shuttle Discovery crew members get ready to leave the International Space Station.
It was hugs and handshakes as the astronauts bid farewell to their colleagues.
Houston and Alpha, physical separation.
She unlocked high above the Pacific Ocean. Then, after she pulls away, there was time for one last victory lap around the station. Then it was a quick tour: the Atlantic, the Sahara, the Med, and northern Italy.
Kennedy Space Center announcing Discovery's arrival, 3.5 minutes to touchdown.
Cape Canaveral will witness 2 more of these farewells as shuttles Endeavour and Atlantis are also due to retire this year.
Main gear touchdown.
Discovery will still be a star. It's a public retirement for her as an exhibit at the American Smithsonian Institute.
And nose gear touchdown and the end of a historic journey.
Imran Khan, Al Jazeera.
And just a quick reminder, you can always keep up to date with all the news on our website. The address for that is aljazeera.net/English. aljazeera.net/English. This is Al Jazeera. I'm Lauren Taylor with the stories making the headlines. In Libya, pro-Gaddafi forces say that they've reclaimed the centre of AlJazeera from rebel forces after fighting killed at least 40 people. But there are conflicting claims. The rebel fighters now say they have retaken the main square. Rebel fighters say they've advanced into the strategic town of Bin Jawad, but faced airstrikes and heavy bombardments from tanks dug in by pro-Gaddafi forces. Gaddafi's forces have also launched multiple airstrikes on Ras Lanouf, a strategically important oil city in Libya. A fuel storage facility has been hit. Most residents of Ras Lanouf have fled, leaving just opposition fighters behind. Senior representatives from Gaddafi's government have been sent to Egypt, Malta, Portugal and Belgium. The Libyan defence minister is in Cairo. It's believed he's due to hold talks with Egypt's military council and the Arab League. The Egyptian army has detained several people after armed men clashed with protesters in Cairo's Tahrir Square. Demonstrators say supporters of the ousted president, Hosni Mubarak, stormed their camp carrying knives, machetes and rocks. Witnesses also reported sounds of gunfire at the scene. The death toll from Tuesday night's clashes between Muslims and Christians in Cairo has risen to 13 people from both sides. 140 were wounded. The violence has prompted further protests by Coptic Christians in Cairo. More than 1,000 Copts were demonstrating on Tuesday against the torching of a church when the violence broke out. Anti-government protesters in Yemen remaining defiant despite the death of at least one man. Security forces opened fire on a crowd of demonstrators outside Sana'a University. Mostly student protesters have camped out in front of the university since mid-February. A Tunisian court has dissolved the party of the ousted President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. The Constitutional Democratic Rally, or RCD, was suspended last month, pending the court's ruling. Ben Ali used the group as a way of maintaining power during almost 2 decades as leader. The Taliban has claimed responsibility for a suicide attack that killed at least 37 people in northwest Pakistan. The victims were part of a funeral procession attended by anti-Taliban fighters near Peshawar. Coming up next, it's the death of fear.
Few events capture the whole world's attention. Fewer still hold it in the era of mass media. In the Middle East, men who have ruled for decades, gone in days. From regional superpowers to wealthy Gulf states, all have felt the impact of the death of a penniless fruit seller in a small provincial town in the heart of North Africa's smallest country. Ultimately,